the entire design of the banking system is a systemic regulated Ponzi scheme. And they are just an outlet and a vehicle for creating digital currency. And so if you reframe it, the reason I loved Bitcoin is because it gave us a framework to actually analyze the economic model of traditional finance in a way that people could understand. So, prior to Bitcoin's launch, when I would give a presentation and say banks own your money, they'd say, well, no, I'm not. It's a demand deposit. I can always demand it. And then when you try to tell someone that with Bitcoin, banks spend your money, literally they control the flow of the entire digital currency that they create by simply deciding who to lend to. And with Bitcoin, it gave the ability for people to actually spend their money peer to peer, and for law enforcement to actually do their job rather than outsourcing it to the financial institution and ruining the experience of money. Because anyone that's got more than $10,000 in a bank account knows that it's pretty hard to spend your money. And then finally, the whole, explaining to people how money was created, and that money, if you were to design a monetary system from scratch, which is essentially what we did in Bitcoin, would you really design a system whereby every time someone borrows money from a bank, they create a new digital currency, and that digital currency has to also factor in the interest payment? And by the way, you simultaneously create a Ponzi scheme, because as the bank creates 97% of all the digital dollar in existence, and you add the interest on top, there's not actually enough money to pay off all the interest. And so you create a game whereby you have to have more money in order to have, you have to have more debt in order to have more money. So you have this digital dollar, and this digital dollar is creates new dollars and then creates a new additional liability. And the only way to find that additional digital dollar to repay the loan is to roll it over. And so you have to pay new depositors with old depositors' money. And when that goes down, you introduce new regulations. And eventually you make the whole thing legal. And in the end result of that is that every single fiat currency that is designed in this way has only one choice. Choice one, get more consumers in debt. So you have credit card debts exploding, you have personal debts exploding, you have student loan debts exploding. And once everyone's maxed out on their credit cards, you've got to get more companies to take on more debt. And once all the companies are maxed out, because they start using their bonds in order to purchase stocks, and you create a stock market bubble that creates valuations that are completely away from reality, because they're closer to the ability to borrow at the cheapest rates. And then those that buy the assets become rich at the expense of those that don't buy the assets. And you end up with all the consumers that took on the credit card debt getting poor, and you have this ginormous wealth inequality until the point where you have the government that needs to step in. So the government always has to step in. And then eventually the government's credit rating becomes to the point where another country is not willing to lend to it. So credit rating agencies then say, well, really, can they sustain that debt? Once you're at 150% debt to GDP, what can we do? Well, the only thing we can do is we can get the central bank to take on all of that debt. And so you end up in a systemically risky system where bank deposits, because you can't own your money, you can't spend your money, and it's being inflated away. Instead, you end up lending your money to the government, which causes systemic risk in the banking system, because now people are taking out their deposits, and instead they're buying government treasuries. And eventually, the end result of the entire regulated Ponzi scheme is you have to choose between recession and inflation. And once inflation, if you choose inflation, which is essentially what the last decade has been since the financial crisis, as well, if you choose recession or inflation, you end up just increasing the debt and increasing the debt. So you increase the debt ceiling, and then eventually you reach the point where you either destroy the currency And the only way to rescue it is to find a new tool. So that next tool is a central bank digital currency. Because you let the banks go bust, they all get gobbled up by a larger bank. And then eventually those larger banks just become the issuers or partners of the central bank digital currency. And eventually the end, inevitable, predictable, and guaranteed result of all of this is you end up with a new fiat currency that competes with the existing fiat currency, a change of empire based upon those that run the inflationary experiment, and the Ponzi scheme finally hits a stage where you have to choose. Do we allow the free markets in a system that's rigged to fail to continue, or do we switch our entire way of organizing our economy into something that looks very more communistic and takes away people's freedoms, liberties, and everything that built the economy? And that's the phase we're at right now. And you normally get that at the extremes of left and right populism, where the people that didn't play the system right blame the rich people, and the rich people try and get out of the country because they're going to be taxed because they're going to be taxed so heavy. When the reality is it's systemic, and it happens every cycle, and we're at the end of a debt cycle.